meeting between Donald Trump and President Obama. Donald Trump, the president-elect of the United States, and the vice president-elect Mike Pence. They're also meeting with the House Speaker Paul Ryan. Pence meets in the next hour with the vice president of the United States, Joe Biden. They'll be meeting at the White House right behind me. While Trump supporters certainly celebrate his victory, thousands took to the streets last night to protest. Thousands of Americans. Demonstrations actually took place in at least 25 cities. Meanwhile, back here in Washington, this transition process has begun. Our senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta is covering the Trump-Obama meeting for us, and our senior political reporter Manu Raju is covering Trump's meeting and Pence meetings up on Capitol Hill with Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, Mitch McConnell, the Majority Leader in the Senate. Jim, first to you, contrast the tone, it was pretty dramatic, of today's meeting with the very harsh attacks that both the President and now the President-elect, they leveled at each other during that lengthy presidential campaign.
That's right. And going back all the way to 2011, Wolf, you heard Donald Trump say during that meeting that they had never met before, but they have been face-to-face before. Remember back in 2011 at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, President Obama mocked Donald Trump to his face about his commitment to birtherism and so on. And that was a moment that it's been said motivated Donald Trump to consider running for president. And it didn't do it in 2012, but he certainly did it in 2016. And now he's the president. To hear those words in the Oval Office that we just heard a few moments ago, Donald Trump referring to President Obama as a very good man, that is a far cry from what we heard during the course of this campaign. Put the birtherism stuff aside. At one point during this campaign, Donald Trump referred to President Obama as the founder of ISIS. And so, you know, this is a huge leap forward in their relationship. And to hear Donald Trump say that he looks forward to talking with President Obama in the future, including seeking his counsel, that is probably something that just about everybody did not expect. But as we've been saying all morning, Wolf, and you said it yourself, these sorts of moments have a way of changing people. The weight of the presidency is something that can change people, and perhaps it's changing Donald Trump as well. But my sense of it is, Wolf, having covered this candidate and now president-elect for the better part of a year, this may just be a timeout in these partisan wars here in Washington. Donald Trump is going to be meeting with the House Speaker Paul Ryan, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in just the next hour or so. And, you know, they have a very ambitious agenda ahead of them. Donald Trump wants to repeal the president's signature legislative achievement, the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. I was talking to a senior Democratic aide last night, Wolf, who said that is actually feasible, that even though the Democrats have 48 senators, they may not need that supermajority in the Senate. They could perhaps tear it apart through budget reconciliation, where you just need a simple majority and so on. So, you know, they're going to be hammering some of this stuff out with House Speaker Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell here in short order. We shouldn't expect the whole world to get decided here in the next 24 hours, but they certainly have an ambitious agenda ahead. But no question about it, Wolf, when you look at the past, and the kinds of words that were exchanged between Donald Trump and President Obama, this is a huge development that we're seeing today, a major call for unity from both the president and the president-elect, Wolf.
And I assume, and I think everyone assumes that the president had an impact on Donald Trump during that 90-minute meeting in the Oval Office. Stand by. Manu, give us a sense of what to expect during Donald Trump's meeting, which is about to begin with the House Speaker Paul Ryan, because as a lot of our viewers know, there's no great love lost over this lengthy campaign between these two men.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this relationship, Wolf, is going to be essential for Donald Trump going forward, having a good relationship with the House Speaker. And as we know, during this very acrimonious campaign season, Paul Ryan repeatedly criticizing Donald Trump for things that he said on the campaign trail. And at one point last month saying that he could no longer defend Donald Trump. He could not campaign with Donald Trump. And that prompted a retort, sharp retort, and attacks from Donald Trump, calling Paul Ryan a weak and ineffective leader. But since then, they have moved past it. At least Paul Ryan certainly has in the last couple of weeks, trying to push the idea of a unified Republican government, campaigning of sorts for Donald Trump and appearing on the campaign stage with Mike Pence. But they have not met face-to-face yet. Paul Ryan and Donald Trump have not met face-to-face yet for several months. Actually, they have tried to meet once during the campaign season last week, right before the election day, but that didn't pan out because of scheduling conflicts. But nevertheless, the idea here in this meeting is trying to figure out where their agendas align and what issues they can push initially. Jim mentioned about the idea of repealing Obamacare. That's certainly something that is feasible through the budget process. At least significant chunks of that bill could be repealed. The health care law could be repealed, but that could take several months to do, and the idea of replacing Obamacare cannot be done through the budget process. They'll have to get 60 votes in the United States Senate to get something enacted, and that will require bipartisan support. So there are a lot of things that both the Speaker and the White House will have to coordinate over, try to figure out their strategy and their tactics, because they don't want to be misfiring. And that's one reason why, too, that Donald Trump afterwards is meeting with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell afterwards to discuss their plans, and the Senate playing a critical role in deciding which cabinet secretaries they can confirm and which ones will be rejected, and which Supreme Court nominee can be confirmed and rejected in this Senate, something that also would need bipartisan support, presumably. So a lot of issues to go through. This is the beginning of several discussions, but clearly they want to have get off on the right foot after both McConnell and Ryan clearly are just not sure what to expect from this new president, Wolf.
Manu, very quickly, do we know if there are going to be joint statements to reporters in front of the cameras between the president-elect and the Speaker?
We're not getting any sense that that's going to happen at this point. We expect to get readouts from aides from the room, but I'm sure a lot of the details we'll have to figure out on our own. They're trying to present the best face forward, that this is going to be a unified party and they're going to be on the same page. So I expect to hear a lot of kumbaya coming out of this meeting today, Wolf.
All right, we'll presumably get some still photos, at least that. Manu, stand by. We're going to get back to you. I want to bring in our panel. David Kenton, he's a senior politics writer for U.S. News and World Report. Our chief national correspondent, the Inside Politics anchor, John King, is with us. CNN politics reporter Sarah Murray. Our CNN politics executive editor, Mark Preston, is here as well. John, we're moments away from the start of the Josh Earnest briefing at the White House in the White House briefing room. He's going to be providing details. We're going to take live coverage of that. He's going to be walking into the briefing room, and we'll hear presumably some more specific details, what was discussed between the president and the president-elect.
It'll be interesting to see. I suspect not, but it'll be interesting to see if Josh Earnest shares when the president said they talked domestic and foreign policy. How specific? Did they have a conversation about if you decide you want to repeal Obamacare, I would urge you, sir, to not do this or to do it this way? What did they talk about ISIS during the campaign? You know, Donald Trump said we will bomb them. I'll let you fill in the word out of them, or we should have seized the oil fields in Iraq. Was there any specific advice? I doubt we'll get much specifics. What we're having today, though, is, kumbaya, cooperation, conciliation day in Washington after the most divisive and disruptive campaign, certainly in our lifetimes. The Republican nominee was not only at odds with this Democratic president that we see him sitting with, he was at odds with his own leadership throughout this campaign. He doesn't fit the ideological box of the Republican Party. We're not exactly sure how this is going to go forward. It is a very safe bet that it will not stay this happy. It will not stay this conciliatory. There are bumps in the road for every new president. There are bumps in the road for every transition of power. But this is a very important signal to the United States and to the world that after this campaign, when people were questioning, would this work? What is going to happen? The White House is still the White House. The Capitol is still the Capitol. There's still traffic in Washington. Some people are honking their horns and some people are smiling. We don't know what comes next, but the early signals of cooperation, especially that picture in the bottom left of your screen there, the Democratic president sitting next to the Republican president-elect, two men with a deep history of personal animosity between each other, saying, it's time to close that chapter. It's time now for me to help you, sir, prepare to live in this house and to have this awesome job in 10 weeks.
It is pretty enormous, pretty significant right now, what is going on, and we're all so fortunate to have this seat watching it unfold.
It's amazing. As I was walking in here today, I ran into a homeless gentleman on the street, and he came up to me and said, why are people so glum right now? It was, why are they gritting their teeth? Why don't they give Donald Trump a chance? And I thought it was really an interesting thing to say, because if we do walk in the streets of Washington right now, there is this still disbelief of what has happened, the enormity of what has happened. I mean, the only thing I can equate it to, in my short, young lifetime is what happened in 1994 when Republicans came in a wave and took over the town, right? Now, it's not on the same level, but there was the same kind of feeling. And I think it's really important what we see in those pictures, as John says, that, listen, as a nation, we need to come together. You may not agree with Donald Trump on 70% of what he says, but the fact of the matter is he is the leader of the free world, and not only is he going to deal with domestic issues, but on the foreign policy stage.
And this is one of the interesting things when you talk to people who knew Donald Trump before Donald Trump became a presidential candidate, who worked with him in business, who lobbied for him, and who were supporting him early on and were traditional Republicans, so they were quietly supporting him early in his presidential bid. They groaned and sometimes made public their discontent with Donald Trump when he said things that they felt were inappropriate about women or about Muslims or about Latinos, but they really supported him because they felt like he would be a good president. They felt like he was the kind of guy who could negotiate and who could get deals done and who would work across the aisle. And so for those people, they are now saying, just give it a minute. Let's see what he's like and if he is different as a president than as a candidate. Now, that's going to be a very hard pill for a lot of liberals to swallow. There are a lot of people walking around like zombies in New York and in Washington, D.C. today saying, oh my God, how did this happen? But, we are seeing this peaceful transition of power. The White House is still standing. And there is, some value to the people who are saying, let's at least give this a chance and see what it's like with the Donald Trump presidency before we all set our hair on fire.
And certainly, David, the president is saying all the right things, the positive things for the good of the country. We've got to work together. Basically, he doesn't say it, but forget about the past. We got to look towards the future right now. And Hillary Clinton said exactly that same thing in her very moving remarks yesterday.
You have to credit both of them sort of rising above it all. I can't imagine standing up there being her, what was sitting in her gut while she said that Donald Trump is the president. You have to accept that. But I just thought it was an exemplary performance for her, given what she has gone through. Now, look, this country is so emotional right now. I keep getting texts from friends all over the country. How's this happen? Is it going to be okay? Why didn't you tell me it was going to happen? Because, frankly, no one thought it was going to happen. And that's why these pictures, while John and everyone's right, the kumbaya is not going to last. There was going to be big legislative battles. But these pictures that are so striking to see Donald Trump sitting next to Barack Obama are so important to try to calm the nerves of the nation.
And for Barack Obama to know his legacy is on the line. I mean, Republicans are going to run this town in January, and so they actually can.
All right, hold on a second. Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, just started speaking. I want to go and listen to hear what he says.
Obama's characterization of it that way.
Well, Josh, I had an opportunity shortly before coming out here to visit briefly with President Obama about the meeting, and there are many details of their discussions that they'll keep between the two of them. A couple of things that I can share with you. Obviously, the president indicated during the pool spray that they had an opportunity to discuss some foreign policy and some domestic issues. Some of those foreign policy issues came up in the context of the president's upcoming trip overseas. The president described to the president-elect some of the issues that he expects to come up with some of our allies and partners and other world leaders that he'll meet with on the trip. And so it was an opportunity for them to talk about some of those issues in advance of the president's trip and in advance of some of the conversations that he expects to have with world leaders on the trip. There also was an opportunity for the two leaders to talk about staffing and organizing a White House. That's complicated business. And any White House is expected to be structured in a way to deal with multiple challenges or even multiple crises at the same time. And the president-elect indicated a lot of interest in understanding the strategy of staffing and organizing a White House, and obviously that's something that President Obama has thought about extensively during his 8 years in office, and they spent a large portion of the meeting discussing the importance of properly staffing up and organizing a White House operation. But look, other than that, what the president heard from the president-elect is a clear commitment to the kind of effective, smooth transition that President Obama has been vowing to preside over for the better part of a year. And the president tends to make good on that promise in the 70 days ahead.
Did the president leave the meeting any more reassured that President-elect Trump will not try to dismantle all of the work that you and your colleagues have done over the last 8 years? And did President Obama make any pitch to Trump, for instance, not to get rid of Obamacare or other significant policies?
Well, listen, I'm not going to get into all the details of their meeting. I think that President Obama came away from the meeting with renewed confidence in the commitment of the president-elect to engage in an effective, smooth transition. That obviously is what President Obama believes serves the American people the best. We are committed to doing what is required on our part to make sure that that happens, and the president was pleased to hear a similar commitment expressed by the president-elect.
Do you know if the president got any reassurances from Trump about whether he plans to pursue what he discussed during the campaign about trying to incarcerate Hillary Clinton?
Well, listen, I'll let President-elect let the president-elect sort of read out his end of the conversation. But as I mentioned yesterday, the president was found reassuring the kind of tone that the president-elect conveyed in his election night remarks. As I mentioned yesterday, these were remarks that the president-elect delivered not just to his supporters in the ballroom, but to the citizens of the country that were tuned in to this historic election, but also to people around the world. And given the intensity of scrutiny of his remarks, it's notable that he chose that kind of tone. I think we saw a similar tone just in the Oval Office 30 minutes ago, where he was indicating his commitment to working closely with the outgoing administration to ensure a smooth, effective transition. It doesn't mean they agree on all the issues. They obviously have deep disagreements. But what they do agree on is a commitment to a smooth and effective transition, and that's a good thing for the country.
Did President-elect Trump talked about looking forward to receiving President Obama's counsel in the future and meeting more times? Do they agree to meet again? Were there something put in place where they're expected to continue the conversation they had today in an additional format?
I'm not aware of any additional meeting that's been scheduled, but I wouldn't rule out future consultations. Obviously, when President Obama served, over the last 8 years, President Obama has benefited from the kinds of conversations that he's been able to have with previous presidents, and I wasn't surprised to hear that President-elect Trump indicated that he feels like he would benefit from those conversations over the course of his presidency as well. Okay, Roberta.
Was it awkward at all, given all the rancor that the two men exchanged versus each other on the campaign trail, and even before that? Was the meeting awkward at all in terms of getting past that? Was there a moment where they had to sort of break the ice and get past that?
Well, to be as specific as possible about this, Roberta, there was no staff in the room when President Obama and President-elect Trump sat down in the Oval Office for 90 minutes. So I think that's probably a question you'd have to ask the two of them. I feel confident in telling you that they did not resolve all their differences. I also feel confident in telling you they didn't try to resolve all their differences. What they sought to do was to lay the foundation for an effective transition from the Obama presidency to the Trump presidency. And this administration, at the direction of President Obama, has been preparing for this moment and this meeting for the better part of a year. And this obviously was an important early step, having the president sit down with the president-elect to discuss that transition. And based on the kind of agreement that was evident about the priority that they both place on a smooth transition, it sounds like the meeting might have been at least a little less awkward than some might have expected.
And you said that it was just the two of them alone. There was no staff in the room.
That's correct.
For the entire time.
That's correct.
And the pool waiting to go into the Oval had seen some other officials, Dennis McDonough among them, on the South Lawn. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what other officials from the White House may have met with, who was in those sort of discussions or meetings going on at the same time.
I know that the President-elect's spokeswoman, Ms. Hicks, was here. I had an opportunity to meet with her, just brief to meet her, I guess I should say, while the President-elect was meeting with President Obama. You noted that she also had longer meetings with some other members of some of my colleagues in the communications team. You noted that Mr. Kushner was here and had an opportunity to visit with the Chief of Staff. Those are the only two staffers from the President's-elect team that I had an opportunity to meet today. There may have been some others that were with him, but I can't speak to all of the meetings that took place. I will just clarify that there is a more formal process that we would expect would guide the interactions between the President's team and the President-elect's team for the 2 months between now and the inauguration. There will be a formal process for that kind of consultation to ensure a smooth transition. The kinds of conversations today were much more informal in nature.
And President-elect Trump mentioned that he learned about some high-flying assets, and I'm just wondering if you know what he was referring to when he talked about it.
I'm not sure what he was referring to, but you can check with his team on that. Okay? Michelle?
So you're saying as far as excellent goes is talking about a smooth transition and having a good tone. I mean, that's all that excellent means.
Well, I think when you consider the profound differences between the two gentlemen, when you consider the fact that they've never met before in person, and when you consider the high priority that the President places on a smooth and effective transition, I think that qualifies as excellent.
And I mean, Donald Trump mentioned that this was originally supposed to only last 10 to 15 minutes. Is that true? And why would it go on so much longer than that?
The President had allotted more time on his schedule for that meeting than just 10 to 15 minutes, but they did end up spending about 90 minutes talking about a range of issues, including what I described to Josh earlier. And I think that would be an indication of a pretty robust, valuable meeting.
So yesterday you talked about the President still having deep concerns, obviously, and that everything he said on the campaign trail about Donald Trump was true. Mm-hmm. This meeting, I mean, considering all of that, it was a brief meeting. Did it do anything to assuage any of those deep concerns?
Well, listen, as I mentioned yesterday, the President campaigned vigorously across the country, making a forceful case in favor of the candidate that he supported. And he did that right up to the night before Election Day. But on Election Day, the ballots were counted, and the American people decided. The President was never in a position to choose his successor. The American people chose his successor. The President vowed to work with whomever the American people chose. So, no, they did not recreate some sort of presidential debate in the Oval Office today. They were focused on doing the work of the American people, fulfilling their institutional responsibilities. And on President Obama's part, that means laying the groundwork so that the incoming president-elect can hit the ground running. After all, as President Obama said in the Rose Garden yesterday, we're all rooting for his success when it comes to uniting and leading this country.
So the President still has those deep concerns, then, is what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the forceful case that the President made on the campaign trail leading up to Election Day reflected his authentic views about the stakes of the election and about the candidate that he went all in to support.
And so, obviously, there was nothing in this meeting that would change any of that.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that the meeting was not convened to try to resolve the variety of concerns that President Obama had raised on the campaign trail. The meeting was focused on the transition, and it went well.
Okay, and Leslie, given that some of Trump's advisors have, just prior to this meeting, talked about looking for all of the ways or wanting a list of all of the ways that they could roll President Obama's policies back starting on day one, does the President fully expect that to happen?
Well, listen, I'm not going to prejudge what their transition process is. Obviously, our goal is to make sure that the incoming president-elect can hit the ground running and can enjoy success when it comes to uniting and leading the country. That's what the President promised yesterday. Convening a meeting in the Oval Office today is part of making good on that promise. How they choose to use the time and what priorities they choose to set for the earliest days of the Trump presidency is something that you'll have to ask them.
What does the President expect to happen, though?
I think the President's expectation is, is that the incoming president will set his own priorities and pursue them accordingly. And again, our goal is to provide them the kind of advice that would give the president-elect and his team the opportunity to succeed in uniting and leading the country. That's what he has indicated that he is made his priority, and we certainly are prepared to do everything we can over the next 71 days to support him in that effort.
Well, does the president now have any reason to believe that Donald Trump is fit to be president of the United States?
Again, I'm not going to, the two men did not relitigate their differences in the Oval Office, and we talked about them quite a bit in here leading up to the election, and we're on to the next phase now. All right, Justin.
You mentioned the formal process, and so I guess I wanted to ask if there are meetings that have either occurred or being set up with senior staff at the White House since Donald Trump won the presidency, especially national security or economic teams kind of going forward.
My understanding, Justin, is that the broader formal process has not yet commenced with meetings. There were a number of meetings between White House personnel and members of both candidates' transition teams in the months leading up to the election. And I know there have been a number of consultations with the President-elect's team and the White House team. But the formal meetings, I don't believe have started just yet.
I wanted to ask about, I guess, press access to today. The meeting with the Vice President and Vice President-elect Pence's close press, which is a break from past precedent, and Carol reported that the Obamas canceled a photo op.
That's not true.
Okay. Can you talk about then why we didn't have a photo op in the way that we have in previous administrations, and why there's no press access, and particularly if this is...
Well, first of all, Justin, you just were in the Oval Office with the President of the United States and the President-elect, so it's not accurate to say that there is no press access. But let's just be clear about what's happened. Over the last 8 years, I've enjoyed the opportunity to have many of you in my office over the years advocating for greater access to the President and the work that he's doing in the Oval Office. And what that typically means is you coming in and advocating for the opportunity to see the President of the United States sitting in the Oval Office, photograph him sitting next to the